Have you ever wondered why some of the greatest men and women of God walked through seasons of deep pain, loss, and breaking before they were ever used in a mighty way? It wasn't by accident, it was by design. Because before God uses a man, he breaks him. Think of Moses, 40 years in the wilderness stripped of power before leading Israel. Think of Joseph, betrayed, imprisoned, forgotten before being raised to the palace. Think of Peter, broken by denial before becoming the rock of the early church. And even Jesus, in his humanity, was broken on the cross before the resurrection revealed God's greatest victory. We don't like the breaking. It feels like failure, like weakness, like the end of the road. But in God's hands, breaking is never the end. It's the beginning. It's the place where pride is shattered, where self-reliance dies, and where the foundation is laid for true strength. God does not waste suffering. He uses it to shape, refine, and prepare his people for a purpose greater than themselves. This message is for every person who feels crushed, overlooked, or broken right now. What if your breaking is not punishment, but preparation? What if the very pain you're fighting is the tool God is using to form you into a vessel he can trust with his glory? Today, I want to show you why God breaks the man he wants to use. Why brokenness is not the sign of weakness, but the secret of strength. And why, if you are in that season, you may be closer to your calling than you think. Pride is the greatest barrier to God's work in a person's life. It's that deep, rooted conviction that we can do it ourselves, that our wisdom, our strength, our talent is enough to navigate life and accomplish great things. Pride gives the illusion of power, but in reality, it isolates us from the very source of true power, God himself. And this is why God breaks the man he wants to use. Because as long as pride rules the heart, there is no room for his spirit to take control. When you look closely at the lives of the people God used most, you'll notice a pattern. Each one of them, without exception, went through a season where pride was stripped away. Moses thought he could deliver Israel through his own force, killing an Egyptian in a moment of arrogance. What followed? 40 years in obscurity, herding sheep in the wilderness, learning humility before he could lead a nation. Paul was brilliant, zealous, and fiercely independent before his encounter with Christ on the Damascus road shattered his pride. He was literally knocked to the ground, blinded, made helpless. Only then did he become the instrument through which God changed the world. Psychologically, this breaking of pride is necessary because human beings are deeply prone to overestimating themselves. We all construct narratives where we are the heroes, where we are in control. That narrative feels safe, but it's fragile. Life has a way of exposing our limits, often brutally. And if God allowed us to live inside the illusion of pride unchecked, we would mistake our own ego for strength. Breaking is God's way of tearing down that illusion so that we can see reality clearly. Without that breaking, we would never learn dependence. And dependence is the soil where true strength grows. Philosophically, pride is a form of idolatry. It places the self at the center of reality, making us our own gods. It's no wonder Scripture says God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. Pride cannot coexist with grace because grace only flows into the empty places. It only fills the hands that are open, the hearts that admit need. So when God breaks a man, he is not being cruel. He is creating space. He is dismantling the throne of self so that he himself can sit where he belongs. Now, this breaking doesn't usually come in the ways we expect. It comes through failure, through disappointment, through being overlooked, through loss. These experiences strip away the illusion that we are enough in ourselves. They humble us. They force us to wrestle with the uncomfortable truth that we are not in control. And that realization is painful. It feels like death. But it's also the beginning of transformation, because when the self finally dies, God's life can take over. The paradox is that brokenness produces freedom. When pride is shattered, you no longer have to maintain the exhausting illusion of perfection. You no longer have to prove yourself or carry the unbearable weight of self-sufficiency. You begin to rely on God, and in that reliance, You discover a strength that doesn't run out. You discover wisdom that doesn't collapse under pressure. You discover peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. The man God breaks is the man God can trust, because a broken man is not driven by ego anymore. He doesn't need the spotlight. He doesn't measure his worth by achievements. He knows he is dust, and that knowledge makes him usable. God can pour His Spirit into such a man without fear that the vessel will claim the glory. So when God breaks you, understand this: it is not rejection, it is preparation. He is removing pride so He can build humility. He is emptying you so He can fill you. He is breaking you so He can use you. And the question you must ask yourself is simple but weighty: will I cling to my pride, or will I allow myself to be broken so that God can make me whole? Because only the broken man becomes the useful man. Only the surrendered vessel becomes the instrument of glory. When God breaks a man, He does more than humble his pride. He exposes his heart. Breaking has a way of bringing to the surface what has been hidden for years. The pain of loss, the cracks of insecurity, the buried sins that we've learned to mask behind competence or business. All of it comes out in the breaking. And this isn't because God wants to humiliate us. It's because He wants to heal what's been concealed. Human beings are masters of hiding. We wear masks, we curate images, we build facades. Psychologically, it makes sense. We protect ourselves from shame by covering up what we don't want others to see. We project confidence while we're inwardly fragile. We display success to disguise emptiness. But the problem is, what remains hidden is never truly dealt with. It festers, it shapes our decisions from the shadows. And sooner or later, it corrupts our ability to live with authenticity. This is why breaking is necessary. When life brings you to the end of yourself, when the pressure is too great, when the illusion crumbles, you can no longer keep the mask in place. The real self is revealed. The insecurities, the wounds, the unhealed places of the soul come flooding out. That exposure is painful, but it is also liberating, because only what is revealed can be redeemed. Spiritually, God exposes the heart because He cannot build His purposes on false foundations. If He gave you influence, authority, or blessing while your inner life was compromised, the weight of that calling would crush you. Hidden wounds would bleed into your leadership. Unconfessed sin would eventually be uncovered, destroying your witness. So God, in His mercy, brings the heart into the open first. He breaks you so you can no longer hide, so you are forced to face yourself honestly before Him. This is why men like David, who was described as a man after God's own heart, were not perfect but transparent. David's failures were great, but so was his willingness to let them be exposed before God. "Search me, O God, and know my heart," he prayed. That's the posture of a man who has been broken enough to know that hiding only prolongs the disease. Exposure is not humiliation. It is the beginning of cleansing. From a philosophical standpoint, exposure is an act of truth-telling, and truth is always disruptive. It breaks illusions and demands confrontation, but it also creates the possibility of transformation. If you live in denial, you can never change because you refuse to acknowledge reality. But when you are confronted with what is truly inside you, your weaknesses, your flaws, your selfish impulses, you are placed at a crossroads. You can either run back to hiding, or you can surrender and let God deal with you honestly. The beauty of God's breaking is that He does not expose the heart to condemn but to restore. He reveals the cracks so He can fill them. He shines light on the darkness so He can drive it out. He shows you who you are, not to shame you, but to shape you into who you were meant to be. That's why many who are broken come out of the fire not destroyed but purified. They are lighter, freer, stronger, because the things that once bound them in secret no longer have power. So when God exposes your heart, the temptation will be to run, to cover up again, to deny what's been revealed. But the invitation is to stay open, to let Him finish the work, because the man who is willing to be exposed is the man God can trust. He is no longer driven by pretense. He has nothing to hide and therefore nothing to lose. That kind of man is dangerous to the enemy and precious to God. And here is the truth to carry with you. What God exposes, He intends to heal. What He brings into the light, He intends to transform. So don't resist the breaking. Don't fear the exposure. Let it happen. Because only in the revealing of your heart can the real work of redemption begin. Strength is one of those words we all admire, but we rarely pause to ask what it really means. Most of the time, when people talk about strength, they're describing something external, physical power, mental toughness, the ability to dominate a situation. But if you look closely at history or at your own experience, you'll see that the strongest people are not those who avoid suffering, but those who have walked through it and come out different. True strength is forged in fire. It is not the absence of breaking, but the result of it. God understands this in a way that we often resist. We want strength without process, resilience without hardship, character without trials. But it doesn't work that way. Just as a muscle only grows by being stretched and torn, so too does the human spirit grow when it is pushed to its breaking point and forced to rebuild. Breaking is not meant to destroy, it is meant to refine. It strips away illusions of control and forces us to find stability in something greater than ourselves. Think about Peter. Before the crucifixion, he was bold, brash, full of confidence. Even if everyone else denies you, I never will, he declared. Within hours, he was swearing he had never known Jesus. That collapse wasn't the end of Peter. It was the breaking that built his true strength. When Jesus restored him, he was no longer the man of loud promises. He was the man who could lead the early church, endure persecution, and eventually give his life. His strength after breaking was entirely different. It wasn't arrogance disguised as courage. It was endurance rooted in humility. Psychologically, breaking builds strength because it reveals limitations. When you finally confront the fact that you are not invincible, that you cannot control every outcome, you learn to depend on something outside yourself. That dependence doesn't make you weak, it makes you resilient. You stop wasting energy propping up the illusion of self-sufficiency and instead draw from a deeper source. The person who has suffered, failed, and risen again is harder to shake than the person who has never been tested. Philosophically, true strength is paradoxical. It emerges from weakness. It comes from acknowledging fragility rather than denying it. This is what Paul meant when he said, "When I am weak, then I am strong." That statement isn't nonsense. It's a profound insight into how human beings function. The admission of weakness opens the door for God's power to take its rightful place. The strongest people are not those who pretend to be unbreakable, but those who know they are breakable and therefore live with greater wisdom, greater compassion, and greater endurance. Breaking also transforms how we relate to others. Before breaking, strength is often about proving yourself, asserting control, or outperforming the competition. After breaking, strength shifts. It becomes quieter, deeper. It shows up in patience, in perseverance, in the ability to carry burdens without boasting. It is no longer about you, it is about serving something bigger than you. That's why the man God breaks becomes the man God uses. His strength is no longer self-centered. It has been purified for a higher purpose. The danger of avoiding breaking is that you remain brittle. Unbroken people often look strong, but their strength is shallow. When life presses hard enough, they shatter. Broken people, on the other hand, bend but do not break again. They've already been through the fire. They know what it is to lose and to be rebuilt. That kind of strength cannot be faked. It has to be forged. So if you feel like you're in pieces, understand this. The breaking you are enduring may be the very process by which God is building the kind of strength He can trust. Not strength for show, not strength for ego, but strength that lasts when the storm comes. And here is the truth worth carrying with you. God breaks not to weaken, but to strengthen. The man who resists breaking will remain fragile. The man who submits to it will discover a strength that cannot be shaken. Purpose is one of those words that carries immense weight in the human imagination. People spend their lives searching for it, chasing it through careers, relationships, ambitions, and even distractions. Yet the paradox is that purpose often comes into clarity only after one has been broken. It is rarely discovered on mountaintops of success, but more often in the valleys of failure, loss, and struggle. That is because purpose requires stripping away the false layers of identity we build for ourselves, our illusions of control, our pride, our shallow goals, so that what remains is aligned with something greater than our own desires. When God breaks a man, it is never arbitrary. It is not cruelty. It is preparation. The breaking creates a kind of emptiness, and it is precisely in that emptiness that space for purpose emerges. You see, as long as you are filled with yourself, with your own ideas of who you should be, with your own agenda for how life should unfold, there is no room for God to deposit His vision. Breaking empties you, and emptiness makes you receptive. Only then can you carry a purpose that transcends your own life. Consider the story of Joseph. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison. He endured breaking after breaking. Yet those very experiences were shaping him into the man who could one day stand before Pharaoh and steward the resources of an entire nation. Without the breaking, he would not have had the wisdom or humility required for such responsibility. The purpose was always there, but it could not be fulfilled until he was broken enough to receive it. His suffering was not wasted, it was the preparation for significance. From a psychological perspective, this is deeply consistent with how human beings grow. Trauma, hardship, and struggle, while painful, can catalyze profound transformation. They challenge the ego's belief that life is predictable and controllable, forcing the mind to reorganize itself around a deeper reality. Out of that reorganization emerges resilience, perspective, and most importantly, a clarity about what matters. In other words, purpose. Breaking burns away the trivial and brings into focus the essential. Philosophically, one might say that breaking prepares us to shift from the pursuit of self-fulfillment to the acceptance of destiny. Fulfillment is about satisfying desire. Destiny is about living in service to something beyond desire. And it is destiny, not fulfillment, that gives life meaning. A man who has been broken and rebuilt no longer asks, "What do I want?" but rather, "What am I here for? What am I called to do?" That shift is the hallmark of someone ready to carry real purpose. This is why some of the most impactful lives are those that bear the marks of suffering. The great leaders, thinkers, and saints were rarely people who had smooth, easy lives. They were men and women who endured breaking, often repeatedly, and allowed it to reshape them for service. Their scars became their credentials. Their wounds became their authority. And their purpose was not abstract, it was born out of pain, which gave it weight and authenticity. The man God breaks is not broken forever. He is broken to be remade, broken to be entrusted, broken to be sent. The greater the breaking, the greater the capacity to hold purpose without it being corrupted by pride or weakened by fear. Breaking, then, is not the end of the story. It is the preparation for the story you were born to live. So if you find yourself in the middle of breaking, do not mistake it for abandonment. It is alignment. God is not discarding you. He is refining you for something greater than you can see right now. The pain you endure is shaping you into the vessel that can carry purpose with integrity and strength. And the closing truth is this: God does not break a man to leave him shattered. He breaks him to prepare him for destiny. The question you must wrestle with is whether you will resist the breaking or allow it to shape you into someone ready for the greater purpose you were created to fulfill.